Greetings, I'm Brian from RC Workboat Haven. Welcome to part 5 of the 1898 supply steamer build. In part 5, we're going to be working on windows and doors. We're going to be installing wainscoting. We're going to do an anchor. We're going to install trim strips. We're going to change the color quite a bit. We're going to install a smokestack. We're going to finish off the pilot house. And we'll look at many other little hobby details that bring the model up to this stage. So let's get busy. Now at the end of part 4 in the build series, we brought the boat up to this state here. I likely will change the colors a little bit as the model progresses because it's just so easy to do and then repaint on top of it if you don't like it. So now the first thing I want to do in part 5 is to add some windows and doors onto the main superstructure. And the general appearance will be somewhat like the tug here to my right. I'll zoom in on that now. Here on the tugboat, I have 3 doors and I've used portholes instead of windows. Those are grommets. So I'm going to be changing that slightly. But I will also have sort of like a wainscoting treatment on the lower part of the superstructure. There'll be a horizontal strip above those planks, and generally the look will be similar to this. Up top, we're going to make windows here for the pilot house. We'll have a door in the pilot house, and I'll also have to build a little extension onto the after end of the pilot house to incorporate an interior ladder, and that way the pilot or the skipper can get up to the pilot house from the inside without having to go out in bad weather and so on. I made a paper pattern for the door and window. Now we're 1/2 inch to the foot here, so 3 inches tall is 6 feet, and I'm 1 1/4 inches wide, which is about 30 inches. The size of the glass is about the same in the door and the window. To construct the doors, I used 1/16 thick basswood. There's a back panel here, and that is the rectangular shape of the door. And then I just simply added in strips and wood glued them to that piece. So I have made a number of doors that are all the same. The windows were just a rectangular piece of 1/16 basswood and a simple frame of 3/32. And in this case, I CA glued them together. So my general layout will be like this. There's going to be 4 windows on the front. On the side, there'll be a door, a window, a door, a window, and a door. And then up top on the pilot house, there's going to be a door, and then a separate arrangement here for the pilot house windows. I'm not going to be able to use these lower ones for that. They'll be a bit bigger. And then on the back wall, under the canopy, there'll be a window starboard and a window port and a stairway in between. And then, of course, the same arrangement up the other side. So that's the general layout. We're going to work on the lower superstructure first. I plan to use wood glue to stick my doors, windows, and wainscoting onto the superstructure. But right now, we've got gel coat that's been sanded with 80 grit, and wood glue doesn't really stick to this very well. So I'm going to coat everything now with latex primer sealer, and then I'll have good adhesion from my work along here and on the pilot house. So now I have primer sealer on the pilot house and the main superstructure. I've left the inside of the windows unprimed and the back side unprimed. To simulate glass, I'm using some plastic that comes with a frozen shrimp tray, and it's fairly heavy duty and it's nice to work with, and CA glue sticks to it very well. I've cut small rectangular pieces out to fit into the window openings. So on this door, I put a drop of super glue just in the center, and then set in my window and hold it down with my thumb for a few seconds. And that is my door with glass. So I'll continue on and prep up these parts. So using a straight edge, I set it up against the side of the superstructure and made light vertical reference lines. This way I can make sure that my doors and windows are lined up in this direction. Then I removed the top deck. Using this curve as a reference, I used my marking tool and scribed on parallel lines that would show me where the height of the door was located, the bottom of the window, and the height of the wainscoting. And I carried these lines all the way around the boat. And I've started to glue on these doors and windows on the other side. Now, because everything is easily removed, I'm able to take this superstructure off, lay it flat on the table, and just glue my parts on looking straight down on the project. Once I've lined out the position of the windows and doors, I apply glue to the back and place it in the right spot, put a weight on it, and use spacers to keep things all lined up. So now with doors and windows in place, I cut some 1/4 by 3/32 basswood and framed in a border, like a framework, around the doors and the top of the wainscoting. So I've gone around and wood glued that. This piece right here on the forward end of the superstructure required a little bit of extra work. I had to make a pattern, and then I used my marking tool, set it 1/4 of an inch, and was able to cut this piece out of basswood. When the basswood is thin like this and you try to cut it with a knife, it's very easy to crack it when you get in the cross-grained area. So that can be super glued and easily put back into position if you've got a pattern that you can lay on the table and just line it up. On the other side, I've started to put in vertical strips. They're 1/16 basswood and they're about 5/16 wide. I want the vertical lines to show up even from a bit of a distance, so I've left a fairly heavy gap between them. That will be partly filled with paint, but I want to add that texture onto the look of the boat. I'm working my way around the boat, and I'll get all these strips in place. So here's an update on the pilot house. I used the same 1/4 wide by 3/32 strips to frame in the doors. I put a window on the after end here, and that window is above an extension that I'm going to be gluing onto the pilot house. I have 5 windows already glued in place, and they're flat panels. I didn't want to bend them. I wanted the glass to look flat and old-fashioned. I had a tricky part to make here, 2 semicircles above the windows and below the windows, and I did that using a pattern. The windows are all the same size, and I located that size by putting a strip of paper around the front of the pilot house and measuring the total distance, and then just divided it up into equal spaces on the flat. And I've got my wainscoting strips glued in place here. I let them project over the bottom of the pilot house, and then it's easy to sand that off smooth later. So it's coming along, and I think once we have the glass installed, it's going to look a little bit different, and it should catch the eye quite a bit. So here's the model with the wainscoting, windows and doors, and the extension on the after end of the pilot house. I have to admit, it looks pretty busy at this point. I incorporated 2 small ladders here, and this would allow the crew to get up to the navigation lights, the spotlight, the horn, in order to maintain them if required. So this little box-like structure is wood glued onto the after end of the pilot house. And I've drilled a hole here so that I can get in with my finger in case I want to run a nut or bolt or wire through it. I used a step bit to drill this hole. So now on the deck, I've used the same bit, and I've drilled a 1-inch hole for the stack and about a 1¼ inch hole here under the pilot house so that I can run wires down from the top. So the main superstructure is basically all glued up. So now I'm going to put some white primer on this exposed wood and we'll take a look. So here's the supply steamer all primed up. I have the windows in the pilot house. The amount of light and the angle of the light makes a big difference when I'm relying on shadowing with a white background. Now in this area here, I'm going to put a staircase. I've made the stairs out of 1/16 basswood. It was a little bit tricky, but it's basically just a matter of getting things the same dimension and clamping it together and using CA glue. Now this ladder is going to be secured at the top with CA glue and at the bottom with wood glue onto the latex paint below. And I also want to get the staircase in good alignment. So here's my stairs fixed in position. I'm giving it a coat of gray paint, same paint I'm using on the decks. And the color I'm using is called Amish Gray, and I got this from the dollar store. I also have gray paint here on certain parts of the pilot house, the roof and so on, and I'm just going to go over it again. I've got one coat on here, but it needs a little bit more to kind of even it out. And while I had my gray paint out, I decided to eliminate that tan color on the railings. It's a nice color and it works great for spars, but I don't think that it's working here on my supply steamer. So I'm going to go back to just basic gray on that. We'll put the whole thing together and then take a look and see what color we have. Well, that's quite a change in appearance. The work on the superstructure just seems to stand out a bit more now. I think that when more other features with color are added to the model, I think the eye is going to pick that up, and this plain background might be just the thing. So next we're going to look at the smokestack. Now the smokestack has to be aligned properly this way, and we have to align it properly port and starboard. This is a very light gauge 1-inch OD steel tubing, and I got this from a dollar store as an extension for a paint roller, I believe. It wasn't telescopic, it was just one piece for a couple of dollars. So I cut the end off square using this as a guide, and I drilled a hole 2 inches down from the top. I put a steel screw in there that acts as a stopper. The stopper is made for this little insert. The insert goes down this far and is flush with the top. And the idea is to put smoke pellets in this little canister that's sealed at the bottom and drop it in, and you get 2, maybe 3 or 4 minutes of smoke drifting out. So it's very simple, and the holder for the smoke pellets was made from a tube from the drugstore in the cosmetics department. I believe that these hold brushes that mascara is applied with. Anyway, I cut it here at the right spot, and it has a sealed end on it, so that's perfect for what I need. I did a recent video with the hooker showing smoke and sound. I've made these little holders the same size, so they will fit on the hooker, the tugboat, and on the steamer here. Now the smokestack is going to go through this hole here on the deck, and that's fairly tight fit. So it's the bottom that I want to fix in place. Inside the superstructure, I have two pieces of cedar that are crossways and attached to the sides. I've prepped up a piece of plywood with a 1-inch hole. The bottom of the stack fits through there, and it's just a slightly loose fit that allows me a little bit of movement. So I plan to put glue on the underside of this base, bring the stack in from the top, and maneuver it while the glue is still soft and get the right position, and then let the glue firm up, and I'll have a removable stack. And now I'll run the stack down. And there's the smokestack, fairly well lined up. So now I'm planning out some work on the main hull. I've made a block here that's going to be a backing piece for my anchor hawser. And I'll have an anchor port and starboard in this location. I've cut some strips of basswood, 1/16 thick and just over 1/8 of an inch wide. So I'm going to be adding a strip right here in black and another strip in black about here. But before I put these on, I want to pre-paint them with black latex and then just stick them on with wood glue. Then I'll get a very nice looking line. And I want to do the same kind of treatment on the stern. Now here on the transom, I couldn't really use a pair of pliers and de-stress the wood and then sand it later because I want to pre-paint this trim. So I had to use a different tactic. So what I did was take 3 pieces of these basswood strips and I soaked them in the kitchen sink for about 5 minutes in hot water. I've got 2 of the pieces here that are clamped in place and they're drying out now. It's been about 2 hours. So I'm preforming them to the shape of the transom, then I can paint these and then glue them on. So here's one amazing thing about basswood. On the 3rd strip, I soaked it to the same extent as these 2, and I got a piece of 1-inch OD tubing, and it was so flexible that I could wrap it around this tube and clamp it at both ends. There was no sign of breaking. The basswood bends beautifully when it's soaking wet. So if I remove these clamps, and as I say, it's been about 2 hours, this is what I've got. It didn't even spring out of place. That's a good heads up and a beautiful wood to work with. So now it's been about 2.5 hours. I removed the clamps and this just sprang out here. So let's just gently, this will easily spring back into place with the glue. I'll get the lower one here. So now I'm going to paint all these strips with black latex and just leave the inner surface unpainted. And here's the lower strip clamped onto the transom. I'm just waiting for this wood glue to set up. Up forward, port and starboard, I have the 2 anchors epoxied into position. And on the starboard side, I have the upper trim strip wood glued in place. So I'll continue to glue these strips in around the boat. I'm going to paint this exposed wood white, and I'm going to paint the anchor flat black. I'm going to cut a piece off the stem. I think it's a little bit too high. So I'm going to set my ruler here and make a line. I'm going to paint the bolt heads that hold on the fenders white. I'm going to lightly sand the smokestack and paint it flat black. And I'm going to paint these panels on all the shipping doors gray. So that's a few hours of fun modeling. We'll take a look after that's done. And here's the steamer with the anchor finished, the strips on. I've got the shipping doors painted gray. A big change was the stack. I painted that flat black, but added in a yellow section on it. And what a difference that makes. And the eye seems to focus in on that when you look at the model, and the rest of the details seems to stand out more for some reason. So that was a nice addition, and it does show what's going to happen when I add various colors throughout the model in the next video. So that brings us to the end of part 5 of the supply steamer build. In the next video, we're going to be adding more color. We're going to work on things like vents, life rings, spotlights, and so on. It's going to be an interesting video, and it's going to help bring the whole model together and change the appearance quite a bit again. So don't miss that one. See you there.